Welcome to We Can Talk About This, conversations with Jonathan and Christa Threlfall about ideas shaping us and the world we live in. And today, we are talking about an incredibly important topic, and that is why you should let your kids question Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that may surprise you. You might find a little puzzling as to why you should do that. But we feel very strongly about this. Do you feel strong about this, Christa?
We do.
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
hmm
And we do.
And have.
And we have four kids, currently aged 7 through 14.
Mhm.
So, out of the baby stage, but into the teen and preteen stage.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of good conversations.
Yeah, we do.
And so we want to talk about this, talk about objections that you might have or you might encounter in thinking about this topic, some questions that your kids might bring up, and how we have done this with our kids.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you may be thinking, man, I don't know if I feel comfortable letting my kids question Christianity. Um, and if you're thinking that way, you may be a parent, and it may be really important to you that your child embraces Christianity too. And so may be fearful that they will not embrace Christianity, and therefore you might think, well, they should just accept what I'm teaching them. Like,
Mhm.
this is the way it is. You need to believe it, accept it. And when questions come up, maybe you feel a little intimidated by it, or like, oh no, this is how it begins. They're veering off the path. This is the beginning of the trajectory toward atheism or some other religion or secularism. And I think that's a big mistake, to not let them question Christianity,
Why do you think it's a mistake?
because Christianity is we are to engage our minds.
Mhm.
When you read the Bible,
Yeah.
and just take the Gospel of John, for example. John is giving miracle after miracle, presenting those to our minds so that we will believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing we may have life through his
Mhm.
name. So it's the way the Christian faith works doesn't bypass our rational apparatus. It actually, we have to think about it, and
Yes.
it's intended to engage our thinking.
Mhm.
And so if your kids get this idea about Christianity, that they're not supposed to question it, they're not supposed to explore it intellectually, they're just supposed to accept what you said to do, that is actually incredibly off-putting, not because Christianity is off-putting, but because what you are doing is not Christianity.
Yeah.
It's not in accordance with what the faith is.
Mhm. We talked about this a little in our Bible study episode, how we're supposed to love the Lord with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and that Christianity and biblical study is not something that God wants to circumvent our minds,
Right.
just to take a leap of faith. And well, don't think about it too hard, because if you do, you won't believe it. No, it's something that God works with our reason.
hmm
And there is something where you have to believe. Without faith, it is impossible to believe, but it is something that you can study and search the scriptures
Right.
diligently to find out. So this letting your kids question Christianity could rightly make you feel fearful.
Yeah.
And I think that that's okay.
hmm
I think that you can come to God with those fears, and that He wants you to bring those to Him and bring your children to Him, and ask God to work faith into their hearts and into their minds.
Right.
But letting them question it is an important thing.
Right. And I think if a parent feels fear and a sense of discomfort about their kid questioning Christianity, like, how do we even know God exists? Or why should we trust the Bible? Or why does the Bible say this? What your child might be doing is raising questions that you've had and have never answered in your life. And you feel fearful about it because you're like, oh no, that taps into something that I've not wanted to address or confront. So your child's questions may be the catalyst for your deepening in faith.
Mm-hmm.
If you will let it deepen your faith, if
Yeah.
you'll be willing to say, that's a really good question. Maybe this sense of fear is because I've never dealt with it and I need to now. And I'm a grown up and I'm an adult. It's about time I get these questions answered or search this
Yeah.
out. That could be good for you too as a parent.
Yeah. I think there's nothing like becoming a parent and trying to explain ways of the world and Christianity
Mm,
to my 3, 4, 10-year-old, that has made me realize what I do and don't know.
mhm,
And on a more trivial level, there have been times where our kids have asked me something about like, why is the sky blue? Or something sciencey that I have started giving an explanation for, and Jonathan will be in the background like, no, no, that is not right. What can I say? I didn't maybe pay attention as well in science class as I should have, but on a spiritual level, there are things that my kids will ask that sometimes I can answer. Sometimes I try to answer and I get myself more confused. And so sometimes I'm like, you know what? Let's ask dad that when he comes home. Or let's look at this scripture together. Let's pray about this. Let's try to figure this out. And those are good things because they're deepening my level of understanding of the Bible and of faith and Christianity.
Yeah, yeah. I also think that the older a child gets, the more important those questions will become, because when the child gets to the point when they're maybe 11 or 12, 13, their abstract reasoning ability starts to kick in. They want to know why they believe what they believe. And the less you engage with them on that level, the less of a chance that they really believe that Christianity is engageable on that level. So why growing up for them, if it only was Christianity was only good for Sunday school and elementary school, it'll then be growing up will mean leaving that behind.
Mhm.
When in fact, growing up for a Christian means discovering in a deeper and fuller and more enriching way what it means that Jesus is Lord of everything. And I think it is a tragedy if parents refuse or feel unwilling to engage their children on that level, and therefore their kids will just end up thinking, well, I guess Christianity was good for this period of my life, but it just doesn't work in the real world.
Mm.
It just doesn't work the more I learn and the more I study. Because Christianity and the basics, the underlying assumptions of the Christian faith actually undergird every discipline of study. Well, Krista said earlier that faith precedes some things. Like there's some things you have to just believe, but that holds true not just for Christianity, but for any academic discipline or any area of life. You have to begin with certain assumptions, like
Mm.
there is such thing as a world that exists outside my mind. I have a responsibility when doing science to report true truth. Well, how do you prove that ethical responsibility scientifically? You don't. You just assume it. You bring it into your whatever discipline you're in. And so, in a sense, while like faith is seeking understanding, faith this is Augustine's famous dictum. It's like faith seeking understanding. You begin with certain axioms of belief, and from there you proceed and you learn. And that's why it's another reason why it's so important to engage with your children in their questions about why they believe what they believe when it comes to Christianity.
Mhm. Any more objections that you think of parent might have?
I think, yeah, what we just covered is parents are afraid, they don't have
Mhm.
the answers, they feel threatened.
Yep.
Maybe there's some laziness, they don't
Mhm.
want to engage with them on that level.
Yeah.
So those would be a few objections.
And then that we kind of already went into why it's
Yeah.
important to do this. But one thing that I think is so important is that when you let your kids ask questions about Christianity and the faith, as a Christian, you have to come to that discussion with this rock solid belief that the Bible has the answers. And if you don't believe that, then that's going to come across in the way you engage with your child. It's okay that if your child is questioning, and if you are questioning, like, okay, how could this be true? How could God be good and allow this? How could he be doing this in this person's life and this? It's okay with those questions as long as you bring them to the Bible and bring them to God and come to him for the answers, believing that he has them.
Mm.
And so I think that is a conviction that as a parent you have to have in order to let your kids question Christianity.
Right. You have to believe that Christianity is sturdy enough to handle those questions.
Exactly.
And that you realize, okay, I may not have the answer, but I know that there is a path forward. And I'm comfortable with that.
And I
And
think that could be an objection too that someone has because maybe they don't believe that Christianity is sturdy enough to handle
as a
that.
parent, right,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because they might think, well, if you poke it, it might shatter.
Yes, yes.
And so I can't we just have to keep this image. We just have to like go to church, just keep doing the things and like a
Yeah.
little robot and do those things and don't question it or everything might fall apart.
You should probably feel nervous at some points.
Mhm.
You should probably feel a sense of like a little lurch in your stomach, like, oh no, what if this what if this isn't true?
Hold on. A parent should feel that?
I think so.
At
Yeah.
what point should a parent stop feeling that? I don't feel that with our kids, I don't think.
Oh, you mean when they ask you questions?
Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking like you're in other words, at any point when when what you believe gets questioned
Right.
and you don't personally have the answers and you feel a sense
Mhm.
of tension,
Right,
it's like,
right.
okay, then you move toward the resolution because you feel so deeply uncomfortable with what could be an unsolvable tension here. So it's
Mhm.
like, oh, wow. Okay, that say the problem of evil that you explained, like how can a good God let this
Right.
happen? And it hits you on a gut level that you hadn't wrestled with before.
Yeah.
And then you have to decide for yourself, can I still believe this?
Right. Right.
Can I believe it deeply enough for myself? And you it's what I mean is that gut level lurch in your stomach is this feeling of unsettledness with that. You don't want to live with that tension. And so you have to seek out the answers. Um, and you're also aware that if you didn't feel that tension, then why would you seek the answers?
Mhm.
And so, yeah,
Yeah.
that's the process of your faith being deepened personally as a parent, so that you can help your kids with that as well. And your kids, ironically, are helping you deepen your faith by asking those sort of questions.
Yeah. Okay, I would say just like I agree with that,
Yeah.
but slight pushback
Okay.
is that I think when I engage, whether it's with my kids or with other people about this, I I I'm not saying I have passed the point of doubting because
Yep.
there are things that I struggle with and doubt, but even when there are questions that cause this tension, questions that I don't know the answer to, I still am like, "Okay, but I know God is good, like, I know God has to be good in this."
Right.
I don't know all the particulars of how this works out and how this does not this looks like the opposite of good, I don't but I know, like, I believe God has to be good in this.
Yeah.
So, um, even though I don't understand all the, like, leaves
Mm-hmm.
and the
Oh,
branches,
fair.
there's, like, a trunk of, like, "But this has to be,"
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
So it sounds like what you're saying is you have a well, this is not what you're saying, but this is what
Yeah.
I think you are communicating, and what I know about you is that you have a firm relational knowledge of God,
Mhm.
that you know that he loves and he is good and loving because he loves you and you live in the experience of that.
Mhm.
And so whatever happens here, you know there's some connection, although you may not be able to explain what that connection is at this point
Mhm.
in your life.
Yeah.
And so that gives you a settledness
Mhm.
when talking to other people who may doubt that, or even to our own kids who are wrestling through
Right.
that, because you know this to be true. It's just a matter of trying to either explain that or work it out.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think a while ago you would describe trials as something that kind of puts pressure
Right.
on your faith
Yeah.
in in like, okay, this something bad happens.
Mhm.
You have said that you believe that God is good, and now this bad thing happens, and it's like putting pressure on
Right.
that belief of, well, is God good? And I think letting your kids question Christianity or engaging with other people who question Christianity, it can put that same pressure. Like, well, is God good? Well, how could he be good and allow this? And
Yeah.
so now there's this pressure that you
Yeah.
have to solve somehow
Yes.
or come to terms
Yeah.
with.
And to take your analogy even further, what I like is let's add even more pressure and see if it still stands.
Yeah.
Let's keep on piling it
Mhm,
up.
mhm.
And if we're afraid to put too much weight on it, if we're like, no, let's not go there, then
Yeah.
the conclusion is, well, I guess it can't hold that.
Yes. Yes.
And so like if your kids bring something up, it's like, okay, yeah. Now let's even intensify that
Mhm.
scenario. And when you go to the Bible, you see the same thing, like the book of Job, for example. That's really, really hard stuff. The
Mhm.
book of Ecclesiastes, that's really hard stuff. I mean,
Mhm.
talking about piling weight upon this structure of belief in God, his goodness, his sovereignty, his providential arrangement of circumstances. And by the way, let's just add some unexplained evil. Let's add some like painful boils all over the body of this man, the loss of his children, all his wealth. Let's see if this still stands up. So this is not, if you approach your faith with a very timid, delicate, don't go there, don't ask that. The assumption is, because it's not trustworthy,
Exactly.
because I can't really trust it. All right,
Mhm.
I see this game. That's not what our faith is. Our faith is sturdy, it's strong. It can handle the toughest questions,
Mm-hmm.
even when we may not be able to understand. I'm not saying that. I'm saying Christianity can handle our toughest questions. I don't mean that it will explain it in a way that we find satisfactory because of the limited scope of our understanding.
Yeah.
So we also have to have some epistemic humility here, realizing I can't know everything there is to know.
Would you like to define epistemic humility?
Just what I said. I can't know everything there is to know.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's our objections and why.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, how do we come up with these questions with our kids? What are
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
ways that we might encounter them?
So, a lot of these questions come from their reading the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
They read the Bible, and I remember a while ago, one of them was reading through the Gospels where Jesus encounters this woman from Syrophoenicia, so she's a non-Jewish woman, and in this encounter, Jesus is apparently really rude to her. And she is asking Jesus to heal her daughter, and Jesus says, "It is not fitting to take the food from the children and throw it to the dogs," as
Mm-hmm.
if she's a dog.
Mm-hmm.
And her response is, "Yes, Lord, but even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the table."
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus says, "Woman, great is your faith." And he says, "I haven't found such great faith in all of Israel." And so when you read that at first, you're like, man, was Jesus rude?
Mm-hmm.
That was a question they had.
Yeah. Yeah. I even when we were reading through the Old Testament, I
Yeah.
remember talking with our kids because when Achan
Hmm.
sins and God responds by having him and his entire family put to death.
Hmm.
And so they were talking about that, like
Yeah.
this, why this? And I remember years ago when I had studied that passage, I struggled with that passage for at least days,
Hmm.
if not longer, because it does seem harsh, and that those are we are not going to get into those things now, though. If you want for a future episode, let us know. But those are the things that deserve wrestling,
Hmm.
and that we shouldn't just read and be like, oh well, God's ways are best, and just glibly move on. Like, no, like let that hit you the
Hmm.
way that it probably hit people when it happened.
Yeah.
um so yeah, and I will say, we have 4 kids. They are all very different in their personalities and just their mental state of how they process things.
Yeah.
Some of our kids ask questions that I never thought of when I was younger.
Hmm.
No, I just threw myself under the bus. But I'm just gonna say, sometimes at dinner, conversations will come up that I'm like, I don't even understand where that question came from. Like
Yeah.
several years ago, one of our kids asked me, "What's the meaning of life?" I was like, "Wow." I don't think I even thought about that much until I was like late teens, 20s. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
So all of that to say that your kids might be in different places
Right.
of understanding, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But it's so helpful when we engage with these questions at the dinner table, because children or parents who may not have asked those questions are now talking about them and
Yeah.
discussing them.
Yeah. It's come from the reading of their Bible
Yep.
and from their unique mental bent
Yes.
or inclination. I'm not sure who you're referring to, which one of our kids asked the meaning of life, but we do have a very philosophically
Mhm.
oriented child, and we have other kids that are just really practical
Mhm.
and they
Yeah.
don't really care about the philosophy of things. They're just like, what does this mean? And so it's not that all our kids are just like really deep thinkers. They think from a variety of different
Mhm.
angles. And so, yeah, those are the kind of questions that they've asked that have emerged from their own reading of the Bible, but also from things that they've heard in church and questions about the Trinity.
Yeah.
How, is Jesus God? If what is it? It's some of them have said recently it's confusing to say to refer to when you're referring to God that doesn't necessarily always mean Jesus,
Mhm.
and so that opens up a conversation about the meaning of the Trinity and God's triune nature.
Yeah. Our kids are also involved in our life group that we have at
Yeah,
church, which is a small group that we meet and discuss the sermon.
yeah,
And so they are hearing questions and discussion that other kids and adults are bringing to the
yeah,
table during that time, and I love that time for
yeah,
them. And then beyond life group, just even other discussions with people that Jonathan and I have at church that sometimes they're just standing right there during discussions that we're having with people about um, difficult things,
Yeah.
and so they take in a lot.
Right, yeah. And as a general rule, as long if just yesterday was Sunday, and I was talking with someone after the service, and they were asking me some questions, and one of my kids was standing right next to me, and as long as the person isn't uncomfortable with my child's presence there, excuse me, I'm glad for them to stay there.
Some water.
I think I'm okay. I'm glad I'm glad for them to stay there because it's helpful for them to hear how I engage with people
Yeah.
and the questions that someone asks,
Yep.
as long as it's appropriate for that person's level of privacy. And it also, in a sense, keeps me, I don't know, grounded
Mhm.
because I know that he's listening. My boy is listening or my
Mhm.
girl's listening. And how are they taking this? Am I being honest in what I'm saying to this person? Am I being clear in what I'm saying to this person? Because they'll ask me about it at home or they'll tell mom about it.
Yeah.
And so it's good for them to be engaged in these conversations. So those are the sort of questions they might ask.
Mhm.
I want to talk about guiding principles.
Yeah.
So I, I would say that the first guiding principle is to be a really good listener,
Mm.
to understand what your kid is actually asking, because there's maybe different layers to that question. Maybe they're struggling with something, and I
Mhm.
think just being an attentive parent to who my child is and what they need at that moment. They may not be looking. You may be thinking, "Oh, this is a big abstract theological idea." They just might need some comfort
Yeah.
or a hug or something along those lines. So just being attentive. I'm gonna go with two, right off the bat.
Before you
Go
go
ahead.
with the
Yeah,
second, though, I think listening is so important.
yeah,
I can, as a mom, be so quick to swoop in and like, I know the answer, and like swoop in and try to like answer their question
yeah.
when maybe they aren't looking for an answer right then, or maybe they know the answer, but they're just struggling with it.
Yes. And actually, if they're asking a question about something you think you know, just wait to make sure that's what they're actually asking.
Hmm.
Because if you have this sort of approach with your kids, you're always eager to give them a quick answer because it's something you've memorized, it's something you heard, it was kind of a neat, tidy answer, and and they're like, well, that's it. But maybe there was more to explore there.
Yeah.
Like maybe there was just maybe your pat answer was barely sufficient for you, but there's maybe a cute phrase that kind of plastered all over that you're gonna plaster it back to them. But maybe you need to wrestle with that question a little more deeply too.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm smiling
Why are you
because
smiling?
this takes so much time.
It takes so much time.
And
It's not worth it.
there are
Just
times where and sometimes our kids just enjoy talking to
yeah,
us. And we love that. We
yeah,
want them to talk with us. We love to talk with them. But it takes a lot of
yeah.
time. It takes a lot of time to listen and sometimes it's getting late.
Right.
There are dishes to be done,
Yes.
there's homework to finish, and,
Yeah.
you know, and so that is I would pile that in the objection category that
Yeah.
this does take time.
It,
Takes time to just listen and listen
yeah.
carefully, and you're not always gonna get it right, and that's where humility comes in too.
Yeah. And there are some questions, and unfortunately I can't think of the specific ones off the top of my head, where especially our more philosophically minded child will ask, and that very question, let's say it's the problem of evil, or let's say it's like how we know anything.
Yeah.
I mean, how does my mind know anything? And I'm thinking, I took an entire PhD level class on this. I don't really want to hash through it. It's almost like the fact that I've studied so extensively on it can almost work against me in the
Mhm.
sense of like, this is a pretty daunting thing.
Yeah.
Let's not talk about it now. But because I've studied it and I've like no terminology for it in the history of this question, um, he's wrestling with it in a fresh way.
Mhm.
And I think it's important for me to wrestle through it with him in a fresh way
Yeah.
instead of just being like, well, yes, so and so said this about this, and there's a history. That's not what he may be looking for.
Mhm.
So I think all that falls under the broad category of being a good listener, knowing
Mhm.
who you're talking to and what their real concerns are.
Yeah.
Second thing is I think is really important, and that is that not all these questions may be about the essence of what Christianity is. It may just be the way that your church or your particular strain of Christianity has done things.
Mm.
So you have to understand, okay, is this particular issue worth lumping in with what it means to be a Christian?
Yeah.
Why do we listen to why do we use this kind of music in our church? Why do we not use this kind of music in our church? Why do we use this version of the Bible, not this version of the Bible? Or why? I'm just trying to think of other
Mhm.
extraneous things just have to do with the particular way in which, because of your area of the country or because of your background or whatever denomination you're part of, that's why you do it. And it would be a big mistake to treat all that as if it were the same as, and that's why Christians do this,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So I think you have to understand where that is. This are they the whole topic is let your kids question
Yes.
Christianity. Now, are you going to defend what are you going to defend as
Yes.
Christianity?
Yes.
I think that to have the maturity and the discernment as a parent to tell the difference between those kinds of questions is really important.
Mhm. Yeah, that's good.
What other guidance do you have on how to answer these questions?
Yeah, I think you already mentioned humility, but that is so important to know when to say, I don't know.
Hmm.
Um, and to not make something up,
Yeah.
as would be my tendency.
I don't think that's your tendency when it comes to important things,
Uh,
but don't tell fibs. I
yeah.
think is do not tell them something that is untrue.
Yes.
And you may think, why would anybody tell their kids something that's untrue? Parents do it all the time. It's
Yeah.
terrible.
Yeah.
It's there could be a kind of pride as well. I want to give a right answer. You see, this is the thing, and you're making stuff up as you go along.
Mhm.
Well, your kids remember what you say,
Yeah.
and it shapes them.
Being careful not just to pass something on that your parents told you, unless you know that
Yeah,
this is biblical truth.
right.
So yeah. Yeah, that's definitely a danger.
Don't tell fibs.
Mm,
Um,
I like that word.
Yeah, yeah. And then another one that a suggestion I would have is to be willing to take time to research it. So if you don't know the answer, you just say, you know what? That's a really, really good question.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I really need to read about that because what that says is I'm humble enough to admit I can't tell you right now. It's important enough to me to tell you, and Christianity is sturdy enough for me to
Mhm.
go and get the answer and report to you.
Right.
So right, it's a win that you're saying I don't know. I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to research it or
Mhm.
study on it or
Yep.
something, and then come back to you with an answer.
Yeah. I would like to object on one thing, and that is I think sometimes children or maybe older people can ask questions in a way that is not desiring of answers.
Definitely, of course, yes,
And we talked about this a little when we talked about having conversations with people who disagree with you.
yeah,
But that that is also a caution, and that is something to pray about. You know, if you feel like you have a child or teenager and they're just like poking, and the their desired outcome is for you just to get frustrated or whatever.
yes. I think that there comes a time, and I've heard teenagers do this
Yeah.
because I was a youth pastor for a while, and it's not really that they want answers; they just want to be difficult.
Yeah.
And it's probably that it's not that they're really doubting this particular thing, is there something they don't like,
Yeah.
and there's something they're not willing to do. And I think that's why that goes back to being a good listener. Okay, what's your real concern here? Are you upset that you're not allowed to,
Yeah.
or are you frustrated that you're being made to go to church?
Mhm.
Where is this point of frustration? And instead of taking these questions and objections to Christianity as threats,
Mm.
listen to what they're saying,
Yeah.
listen to their concern, and realize there is a person who's on a particular stage of the maturity of their intellectual formation, of their moral formation, and what is the concern here, and that the issue that they may have, the objection they may have, may be on a moral level.
Mhm.
Maybe their heart is not submitting to something or does not even believe. So there's this idea in that it is a trusting heart, a believing heart that seeks true, that gets the answers. And Jesus talks about this in the Gospel of John. He says, you must believe in order to know.
Mhm.
And unless you're willing to believe the doctrine, you're not going to get anywhere. And there's a sense in which our minds can get confused because of a stubbornness that we
Mhm.
have.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, being sensitive to that, I think, is an important aspect in listening to your children's objections or questions about Christianity, but also understand where's the rub really
Mhm.
here with them.
Yeah. Prayer is such an important thing with this
Yeah.
too. Praying with your child, with your teenager who has these questions.
Yeah.
Okay, you know what? I want to know the answers. I want you to know the answers.
Mhm.
Let's ask God. Let's ask the one
Yes.
who has the answers
Yes.
to show us and to help us to understand this. And even by doing that, that shows your child your humility. That hey, mom, dad, we're not the ones with all the answers,
Mhm.
but God has them,
Yes.
and we can go to Him with them. And the more you and your child question Christianity, the deeper your faith can grow.
Yes.
It's like, okay, I think this, but what about this?
Hmm.
Oh, okay, then this is still true. Okay,
Right.
God is still good. God is still sovereign in
Yeah.
this. And it's like the shaking kind of can settle and root you.
Hmm. Yes. Yeah.
So,
I think that's very good.
mhm,
And this is definitely a kind of episode that we want to list some resources. And there are some
yeah.
excellent resources out there for the kinds of questions that your teenagers may be asking, your kids may be asking, and you yourself may be asking. So we'll link those in the episode notes, and so that you can have some further reading on your own.
We can talk about this podcast.com. We'll see you next time.